Richard Clarke, the guy whose hair was on fire before 9/11, comes in to tell us about how Trump wasted the best tools to fight COVID-19. Check it out, leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. But right now, Richard Clarke, is on the line with us. He's a national security and crisis management expert, former chief counterterrorism advisor to the National Security Council in the Clinton administration, the person that President Clinton tasked with building our stockpile. He's also the author of 9 books, including his latest, The Fifth Domain. His website, Richard Clarke, with an E at the end, .net. And Richard Clarke is his Twitter handle. Mr. Clarke, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we talked. So glad to have you with us. In your book, Warnings, you talked about the need to constantly scan the horizon looking for threats. How have the Clinton and Obama administrations behaved relative to looking at threats compared to the Bush and Trump administrations?
Well, Tom, it's good to be with you again. The book Warnings was about exactly this. It's got 12 case studies of places occasions where experts said there was something terrible coming, and they were data driven. They had evidence, and they went to higher ups. They went to government officials, and they were ignored. And one of the chapters in the book is about pandemic disease. And we demonstrate there that there was a lot of evidence. This is a book we wrote 4 years ago. There's a lot of evidence that there was going to be a major pandemic global disease, and that the government wasn't ready for it, and that people have been warning about it for years. The Clinton administration, as you point out, was afraid that this might happen and developed the first ever national medical emergency stockpile, which the Obama administration then used to crush Ebola in Africa before it could spread here. Unfortunately, the Obama administration, when they tried to refill the national stockpile of medical equipment, the Republicans in the Congress blocked them. So when Trump turned to it this time, it wasn't robust. But, Tom, the point is, the Trump administration and the president himself were told about this coming in January, and that's when they could have acted to refill the national medical stockpile and to do other things, to get the testing kits ready and whatnot. And the evidence suggests they were warned in January and in February and did nothing.
Yeah, well, let me take it back from that. This is from ABC News, and I'll just quote a couple of sentences from this report. I'd like to get your take on it, since you worked in these, inside the White House. As far back as late November, this is the first sentence, as far back as late November, U.S. intelligence officials were warning that a contagion was sweeping through China's Wuhan region, changing the patterns of life and business and posing a threat to the population, according to 4 sources briefed on the secret reporting. Concerns about what is now known as the novel coronavirus were detailed in a November intelligence report by the military's National Center for Medical Intelligence. The report was the result of analysis of wire and computer intercepts coupled with satellite images. It raised alarms that this could pose a serious threat to U.S. forces in Asia. And then they quote one of the sources who helped write the report. This is somebody from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Quote, analysts concluded that it could be a cataclysmic event. It was then briefed multiple times to the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's Joint Staff, and the White House. And then they go on, from that warning in November, the sources described repeated briefings throughout December for policy makers inside the National Security Council and at the White House. This is pretty dramatic stuff.
Yeah, and what it means is you could have gotten on this last year, at the end of last year, but certainly by January. And what's the lesson from all of these facts? The lesson is that you have to have professionals in professional positions in the government. You can't have amateur hour with the National Security Council staff. You can't have amateur hour in the White House. You can't just pick up your friends. We do. You can't just pick up your friends and relatives and give them jobs and expect the system to work. He calls the professional cadre the deep state, which is pejorative. But there is a professional cadre in the government. And if you take away their jobs and give them, frankly, to boobs, then something will happen. And in this case, it's the pandemic. Something will happen where a trained professional will see intelligence information and know, break glass, sound alarm, and others will not. And this, unfortunately, is a very high price that we're paying for the president's attitude toward government and his inability to govern. You know, we like the fact that some people like the fact that he had no government experience. Well, this is the price we're paying for having a president with no government experience.
Right. Literally the first president in the history of the United States who was neither in the military nor served any elected in any elected capacity. I'm curious, just a couple of other questions, and let me toss them out to you. And we've got about, I think, 3 minutes here until we hit a hard break. What are the other threats that Trump's ignoring? And are you concerned that, as he asserted back in 2012, he tweeted multiple times that Obama was going to start a war with Iran in order to get himself reelected? Do you think that that Trump might try to start a so-called small war, like Bush did with Iraq, to get reelected with Iran or North Korea, number one? And number two, overnight, Trump has been rage tweeting, over 40 tweets, many of them focusing on Mike Flynn. What would be the implications of a pardon for Mike Flynn? We have 2 minutes, sir.
Well, let me talk about Iran and North Korea. A war could break out at any time with Iran or North Korea, even though the professionals, again, the military, don't want that. The national security apparatus doesn't want that. We're trying to avoid those two wars, but they're both on hair triggers. And the president the other day instructed the military not to be pushed around anymore by Iranian naval ships in the Gulf. Well, they haven't been. But he told them to lean forward and be more aggressive when they come into contact with the Iranian Navy. That's the way a war starts, by accident. And I wouldn't put it past this man. I wouldn't put anything past this man. I certainly wouldn't put it past him to start a war, to change the topic, to take attention away from this incredible failure that he has had with the response to the pandemic. It's a long way between now and November, and anything is possible. I certainly hope that cooler heads will prevail, but you can't know when the president is the commander-in-chief, and there aren't a lot of filters between him and ordering us into war. With regard to Mike Flynn, he was always a bad choice. People in the Obama administration warned Trump not to pick him, that he was possibly already doing things with the Russians and the Turks that were illegal. This conversation with the FBI that Trump is focusing on was a conversation after he had done all the things that triggered the FBI's interest. It's not that conversation that got him in trouble. It's the things that caused that conversation that got him in trouble.